I sometimes do not like to go shopping for the very reason that we have been talking about, because again, I wonder just how much I am duped by 20% off, 50% off, and I say off of what? Off of the markup. If you've got a 200% markup and it's 50% off, it's still 100% markup, and you're kidding yourself. And the scripture says, provide things honest in the sight of all men. That's why sometimes I don't like to look for cars, because the price on the car is not really honest. That's not what that's a dickering price, and that's what we're talking about. Somebody getting more for less. Somebody getting something from someone else that is going to benefit them and lessen in amount the other. Now, we saw that it's a serious business to do that, because the Bible calls it defrauding, it calls it robbing, and it also calls it three more things that we're going to look at. It calls it sin. Verse 14 of Deuteronomy 24. Thou shalt not oppress the hired servant, the poor and the needy, whether he is thy brother nor strangers that are in the gate. Doesn't matter who it is, the principle holds true. A laborer is worthy of his hire. And if that is the price and he did the work, so don't oppress them. Now, oppression simply means to not give their just due. That's what oppression is. To keep them suppressed instead of prospering. At his day thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor. He sets his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee to the Lord. Now note that. What if the Lord is blessing him? What if he believes in this concept of, yes, I'm supposed to work, I'm supposed to be self-sufficient, and I do the work, and this guy wants me to take less. I have to have less than a quality of life because this guy wants to build upon my work and the quality of my craftsmanship, and it is something that the Lord is going to revenge. We'll see that in just a little bit. What if the Lord is prospering him? He gave you the money, he prospered you, and now you want a service, but instead of the reverse being true, of allowing you to be a source of blessing to another, you become chintzy with the grace of God. God calls that a sin unto you. And it comes from the root word kata, it's the Hebrew kate, which simply means to miss the mark. Now, if you disbelieve on Jesus Christ, you miss the point of the whole thing. God wants us to trust His Son. But with regard to dealings man to man, if we don't want to pay the price, we miss the point of the whole thing. That's what it's saying here. And that's sin. God has set up a perfect system where you should be recompensed for the work that you do. Don't muzzle the ox that treads the corn. And we've seen all of those things before. So therefore, God calls it sin. Now, we think it's a sin when we get slighted with our paycheck, but the same philosophy ought to hold true when it comes time for us to pay for the services of others. So you remember the story of the unjust servant where he came to his Lord and said, Lord, yes, I owe you all this. And the Lord said, sell his family, sell him off, and pay the debt. He said, give me some time and I'll pay you. And he went to his fellow servants and started choking them and saying, I'm going to sell you off if you don't. And the Lord, who forgave the debt, it got wind of it, and he brought him in and said, look, I forgave you, but you wouldn't forgive others this debt. And the man got in trouble and lost everything. Why? He sinned. He missed the point of it all with regard to this. Now, there's another verse of Scripture we need to look at, Jeremiah, chapter 22, where God calls it covetousness. But this time, the Hebrew betzah indicates that it is unjust gain. Jeremiah chapter 22, starting with verse 13. Woe unto him that builds his house by unrighteousness. You get the point? If indeed you are building your nest egg by wrong principles, God says that's unrighteousness. Covetousness. We could have used the word there too, unrighteousness. And his chambers by wrongdoing, that uses his neighbor's service without wages and gives him nothing for his work. I'm telling you, this business of Jewing down, of trying to cheapen, that's wrong. If that's how much they charge and you can't pay it, go someplace where they work for what you can pay for. But this business of making an attempt to lessen their goods, to increase both your pay and commodity at the same time, because that's what it is. You keep your money, yet get the service, is nothing but covetousness. That saith, I'll build me a wide house, large chambers, cutting out windows, and it's sealed with cedar, painted with vermilion. Shalt thou reign because you closet yourself or enclose yourself with cedar? Did not your father eat, drink, and do judgment and justice, and it was well with him? In other words, he paid for what he got. That's called good judgment and justice. You are unjust to take from somebody who does the work and not want to pay. Verse number 16. He judged the cause of the poor and the needy. Then it was well with him. Was not this to know me? In other words, that's how I work. If you do work for me, God, I will reward accordingly. If you want to be Christ-like, God-like, then that is what you're to do. He did that to be more like God. Last verse is verse 17. But your eyes and your heart are nothing but for your covetousness, which is a way of saying that you are totally consumed with things. Unjust gain is the word. You want something for nothing, and that is the total outlook that you have. Now, this is the male of the species, most usually. The one that's renowned for looking for the bargains constantly is the female of the species. But it's true either way. You have to be careful of what the Bible calls covetousness or unjust gain, to shed innocent blood for oppression and for violence to do it. All right, now, here we're going to look at one more word in a twofold way. You say, Pastor, you haven't picked on the clergy. I'm going to pick on the clergy here in just a little bit. Ezekiel 22. Ezekiel 22. And we'll start with verse number 12. Okay, this time we're going to look at the word extortion. It comes from the first word we looked at in the Hebrew, ashek. This is oshek. And defrauding now to extortion. What is the difference? Well, this one means to wrest or wring a personal gain from another by an undue exercise of coercion, squeezing, putting the pinch on, in other words, gouging, or any other type of influence where you get something for nothing. Verse 12. In thee have they taken gifts to shed blood. What does that mean? Just simply this. If somebody does work for you and you do not pay them, and they have to have a standard of living, the wolf comes to their door, and they don't have the money to pay. But what is the next thing they do? Well, on the one hand, there are those in this, quote, welfare state who don't want to work, who go to drugs and thievery and so forth, just simply because they're too lazy to get a real job. But then on the other hand, there are those who want to be honest, but because of greedy men at the top, don't get paid commensurately for their work. And if they don't get paid and their kids are hungry, what do they have to do? They have to steal. They have to wait to shed blood. In other words, they're put in a situation where they're forced to do nothing else but threaten the life of another in order to get gain. They tried the honest way, and because of dishonest people at the top, it says, you've taken usury, increase, you've greedily gained of thy neighbors by extortion, and you've forgotten me. I'm the one by grace who really supplies your needs. Hey, I'm supplying their needs through you. They did the job, pay them. You say, you've forgotten, that's my system. Behold, therefore, I have smitten thine hand at thy dishonest gain, which thou hast made, at the blood which thou hast been in the midst of thee. Now, this is talking about extortion in business. Where, and the resting and the ringing are the operative words here. Always trying to, as they say, get blood out of a turnip, to keep on squeezing and squeezing, so forth. One way or the other, from the top down or from the bottom up. Now, the point that God is saying is that is called extortion, and you've forgotten God's grace system. Now, lest anybody think that we do not want to pick on the clergy, turn to Matthew chapter 23. A long time ago, when I started to point this out about some, they have massive empires and constantly asking for contributions and so forth. Well, the key is this: do they teach the truth? Well, for the most part, they don't. Now, why are they working? They're working to produce a product known as truth. It is somewhat intangible, except that it can be seen and felt on the inside. It's supposed to be truth. That's why a lot of times a ministry cannot be measured in numbers. It has to be measured in terms of the quality of doctrine that the people of a pastor have absorbed and utilized. We are his workmanship, but he works through a pastor to craft and fashion the quality of spiritual life. But there are those who don't teach the truth about prayer, about healing, about the Christian way of life, speaking in tongues and the like. What are these people? Well, if you'll note verse number 25. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but within you are full of extortion and excess. You teach how to pray, but those prayers do not count. You teach certain things in the Christian way of life, and it's false doctrine. But you get paid for teaching people lies. And that's why I've warned and warned. Unless the man tells the truth, if you kick in the kitty, you know what you're doing? You are being, as they say, robbed and defrauded by an extortioner. He is expecting you to pay money for something that is not a correct or quality product. It is flawed. Don't give the money except to those pastors who teach the truth of the Word of God. Why? Because they're extortioners. They're just telling you what you want to hear rather than what the truth is, what you need to hear, so that you might cross their palm with a little money. Think of the Crystal Cathedral out there, and on we could go with people who have these massive churches and great salaries. Now, if they're telling the truth, then God prospers them with that amount of people, and that's fine. That's one thing. He did it honestly. But anybody who stands behind a desk and doesn't tell the truth of Bible doctrine, and you give money to, as Pastor Moki says, it's putting money down a rat hole. I mean, you might as well burn it, because that's all of the value it's going to be. Somebody has taken you for money because they're extortioners. I just wanted to be fair, just to say there are those of the management and laborers that do these things, but it's filled with the clergy as well. Therefore, the key is, are they telling the truth? to live by grace principles and the like. Anything else is resting and a wringing of one's purse or wallet in order to get gain. The Bible calls it excess. All right, now, we want to go back to the book of Leviticus, chapter 19. Now, with regard to wages and work, we want something for nothing. With regard to price and product, that same thing is true. By the way, with regard to this extortion here, a lot of times people want that in the spiritual way of life too. They want a pastor to do this. They want certain things in the church, and yet they'll complain, but without giving. What is that? That is putting undue pressure on somebody in order to have something, or will not come back to the church. That's undue pressure on somebody to either do it or a threat. And that's why I've said a long time ago, I learned in my ministry, if your money means more to you than doing it correctly, please keep it. If it means that much to you, it doesn't mean that much to me. I'll learn to live with what God provides. And and I say that personally, but any grace minister needs to learn to live that way. Because that's what it gets to be. Throw God a couple bucks and, oh, God, answer my prayers. I'm in trouble now, or I'm sick, or my relative or friends are sick, and oh, God, I'll kick in about $10 once a year just so you answer my prayer. Just keep it. Just keep it. It's no good. You're not going to bribe God. It's worthless. But with regard to something for nothing, price and product. Leviticus 19, verse 35. Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Now, you'll see in the context, we're going to talk about price and commodity, price and product, getting what you pay for. It's the one, we've talked about getting what you work for, the other about getting what you pay for, or what you've crafted. Judgment is the Hebrew word mishpat, which means a standard by which you justly or rightly decide an issue or a controversy. Now, for example, you would go into a grocery store. This is a standard with regard to goods and services. But since it especially hits that of goods, when you go into a store and here is a gallon of milk as far as the shape is concerned. Are we all familiar with what a gallon of milk looks like in the plastic jug? I would guess so. You go to lift it out of the fridge there in the store, and you only have it half full. Now, would you pay the price of $2.28 for a full gallon, or would you put it back and get either the full gallon inside in the container, or if you said if I wanted a half gallon, I'd just go there, you see. If you pay $2.28 and you have the gallon container but only a half of the product, what's happening? Well, you're getting cheated. You're paying more than what you get. Paying more than for what you get with regard to the product. Judgment is, if you pay for a gallon of milk is what you should get. Not a half gallon, not a pint, not a quart, but a full gallon. That is the word mishpat. It means the standard by which you solve a controversy. Here is a gallon of milk, and at our store it's $2.28 a gallon. What do you expect to pay? $2.28. What do you expect to get? A full gallon of milk. Unless, of course, you have the 2%, 1%, and now they have fat-free. But be that as it may, you're still paying for a service. Okay, now, we'll come to this here in just a little bit, but I'll allow you to copy these notes as we look in, starting at verse number 35. Do no unrighteousness in the standard by which a controversy is solved. What is the controversy? If it's so much a yard, so much a gallon, so much for a dry measure, so much for a liquid measure, then that's what you pay for. That's what it takes for the person selling to maintain a certain standard of living. Don't expect to pay less in judgment. And also, it's referring to the seller. Don't cheat your customer. In meat yard, that is measuring any carpet or cloth, in weight, in measure, just balances and just weights, a just ephah, that is a dry measure, and a just hin. Now these are all standards that God set up for Israel, around which a price on a pay scale was built. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. Note, observe these statutes and my judgments. God calls them my judgments. Now, in today's economy, there is such a fluctuation, the price of gold, the price of silver, and so forth, and the pay scale and the like, that it's hard to get a fix on what should be owed. That's why, though we're teaching this, we have no idea that we're ever going to fix what's wrong with the world's economy. Somebody's going to try to fix it. He's called Antichrist, and you buy and sell. He's going to fix prices and salaries. That's what the mark of the beast is all about. And the only one who's really going to fix it is the just judge himself, Jesus Christ. So, don't be unjust in any of these things. Now, it's reciprocal. Don't expect to pay less if that's what the price is for this man to maintain a certain standard of living. And don't expect to get less from the person that you purchased these things from. Deuteronomy chapter 25. Deuteronomy chapter 25. Starting with verse number 13. Therefore, don't have in your bag different weights, great and small. Now, we all understand what this is. For example, if you go into a store and you want a pound of bologna, somebody puts on this side of the scale a pound of bologna. Please, nobody say that you've gotten a pound this morning. Or we're going to overcharge. Okay. On the other side, you have 1 pound, 1 pound. A just weight means that this is a pound weight here, and that this is a pound of meat, and it's equal, so that you get what you pay for. Now, the people who want to trick want to either lessen the amount here and increase the amount here, so that in a twofold way there's a markup actually. You get 14 ounces or 13 ounces instead of 16 ounces of meat, and over here the price is say $2 for the 16 ounces. They increase it to $2.05. So on this side they get a little more, and on this side you get a little less, but do they get a little more? Yes, absolutely. So you can't have a different weight. Over here, if it's a pound of meat, over here should be a pound weight, so that they are equal. That is justice, and that is righteousness. Now we talked about liquid measures, verse number 14. Not have in your house different measures, great and small. Now this is the liquid. Over here is the gallon, over here is the price. So that, again, the same thing is true. The container you have should be precisely the 1 gallon, so that you get what you pay for. Now, with regard to some of the dry measures, what they would do is just simply, they would have what would be recognized as say a bushel or what have you. And on the bottom, they would put here a false bottom, so that it looked like a bushel, but when all the grain was in, some of the bushel was missing, so that they would get that increase for their particular commodity. Either way, whenever one does either or both, that is called a different balance, and it is not perfect. Verse 15, you'll have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure, that thy days might be lengthened in the land that God gives thee. For all that do such, and all that do unrighteously, are an abomination to the Lord your God. Very serious with regard to this matter of pay scales and getting what you pay for. Now, please remember that there are a whole lot of things that we have mentioned with regard to figuring in here and the like. But what we're talking about is the only righteous thing to do and the only just thing to do is to pay for what you get and get what you pay for. That is right. Anything else is unrighteousness. So, this matter of saying, well, can't you just skim 10%? Can't you just give 20%? Well, that's asking to take less here and give you more here. That is a different weight, a different measure. It is an unjust balance. And it's abomination to God. You can't do it. All right, now, let's see what Proverbs has in store for us here. Proverbs 11. Proverbs 11. A false balance, verse 1, is abomination to the Lord. A just weight is his delight. Chapter 16, verse 11. A just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are his. In other words, if he established the standard, or if it's an understood standard, that's what he goes by. Anything else is defrauding or robbing. It's extortion. Don't do it. Chapter 20. Chapter 20. Verse number 10. Diverse weights and diverse measures, both of them alike are abomination to the Lord. Verse 23, diverse weights are an abomination to the Lord. A false balance is not good. Now, the only reason I did that is just to show you that God is kind of serious about this. He didn't mention it just once in passing. Time and again, he addresses this matter of work and wages, price and product. And it is important to understand that the world has the mentality of something for nothing. It is an attempt to beat the curse again. That's all it is. The curse says you've got to work by the sweat of your brow in order to earn your bread. And with this situation, it is getting something for nothing to beat the curse, so that someone else has to work doubly hard in order to measure up to what you've got. Can't do it. All right. Now, I have here what I call the free lunch syndrome. I think we're going to go to one more portion here. Amos 8. Amos 8. Amos chapter 8. If you have trouble finding the minor prophets, go to Daniel and start turning your pages to the left. Eventually you'll come up on him. Amos 8, starting with verse 4. In either case, whether it's for wage and prices, management and labor, price and product, and so forth, buyer and seller. Hear this, verse 4, Amos 8. Ye that swallow up the needy, even to make the poor of the land to fail. See, here is the kicker. Often, when we purchase that product that is more for less, you have to take into consideration somebody made it, and because there's less money coming in, it is nature. You can't help it. They have less of money to go out by way of pay. They have less money to go out by way of making comfortable conditions to work in. It's just a matter of course, unless you sell in volume. And that is a viable alternative and option. Saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we might sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we might set forth wheat? Making, note this, the ephah small and the shekel great. What is the ephah? The ephah is over here. Just put the letter E. The ephah is the measurement. The shekel is the pay. What did they do? They put the false bottom in the ephah, the dry measure, so that you had less product here, and they increased the price over here. So the shekels on the one hand, you increase that, and you lessen the amount of product that you gave. Now, is that a twofold increase? Yes. It'd be one thing to lessen the product and keep the price the same, but it's another thing to lessen the product and increase the price. So you can get a one-fold increase or a twofold doing it this way. Note, you falsify the balances by deceit. We might buy the poor for silver, slave wages, and the needy for a pair of shoes. The Lord, verse 7, has sworn by the excellency of Jacob, I will never forget any of their works. You can't do it. If you want that product, and that product costs a certain amount, to keep coming and asking for, in effect, asking for a handout, begging for them to take less, is absolutely falsifying the balances, one way or the other, whether it's by the buyer or the seller or what have you. You can't do it. Now, if you can't afford it, here's the answer. Use what grace has provided you and live within those means. If you can't afford a pair of $100 Florshams, okay, then go to Shoe Carnival. God forbid, go to Shoe Carnival and get them. But anyway, I'm just kidding. Many of you aren't laughing because you go to Shoe Carnival. But you understand what I'm talking about. May the grace of God keep us from the Shoe Carnival. No, we have to go there sometimes. If grace provides that, then that's what grace provides, and we're content with what grace provides until God promotes and prospers accordingly. All right. Let me show you something here with regard to somebody who worked for something that he thought, and turn to Genesis chapter 29 before we move on here. Genesis chapter 29. And verse number 25. Now, you'll remember, here's where we get the idea of Jewing them down. And it can be either way, you see. Jacob came to Uncle Laban, and Uncle Laban had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. And Jacob went bonkers over Rachel. And Leah, though, was the older sister. And so Laban said, okay, if you want to marry Rachel, you've got to work for her. And so he, in effect, put in 7 years of labor. And he was so in love with Rachel, it just went by so fast. He didn't mind doing the work. It was a prized possession. She was quality. He was willing to pay the price. The pearl of great price, Rachel. But it came time for the honeymoon. It came to pass, verse 25, that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. You see, they wore veils in those days, and perhaps quite a shock. He thought he married the one and took the veil off, and it was the other one. He almost had the big one. He came to Laban and said, "What's this you've done to me? Did not I serve thee for Rachel? 7 years I put in. Wherefore hast thou," note, "beguiled me?" Same concepts of what we're talking about. You tricked me. You had me to work for something other than what I thought I was going to get. It's not that Leah was not a good catch. She just simply was not the gal that Rachel was. But he got not only 7 years of labor for him, he had to work another 7 years for Rachel. And because, verse 26, "it must not so be done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn, fulfill her week." Now that is the same word as Daniel's 70 weeks, which means 1 week of 7 years of labor for her. All right, 14 years for one woman, just to purchase her hand in marriage. "We'll give thee this also for your service, another 7 years. Okay, now we're going to come, let's see. I think I want to go to bring, we'll come back to this tonight. Let's go to our foundational text, back to 1 Timothy, and we'll clinch this. I want to explain something as we're bringing this to a close with regard to the shoe carnival. Because, again, you're looking at somebody who was raised by a man who worked on the railroad in western Pennsylvania near the coal mines of western Pittsburgh, near the steel mills of the city itself. There were a lot of days when the clothes and the shoes had to last. A lot of days when bologna, bread, beans, and Kool-Aid was our standard fare. Also, my mom always seemed to have a lot of macaroni and cheese and that sort of thing. Until, of course, things got better for our family. We shopped at stores in accordance with my dad's salary. So I'm not making fun of the shoe carnival as such. I understand. I've been there. What I'm making fun of is I don't like for somebody to make it, I like the circus to be a circus. I like the carnival to be a carnival. If I'm going to go to a shoe store, I don't need some barker barking at me to do something. I want to be there. I want to see what they have, try them on without any pressure, and go from that point. So that's why I say deliver me from the shoe carnival. Just simply because how a circus atmosphere and selling shoes mix, I'll never know. Chapter 6, verse 9. We're going to use this as our closing illustration. We'll come back tonight and finish the last installment of the love of money. I know you wished I'd have preached on the love of Pete or something, the love of somebody else. One of the points we want to make with this matter of the love of money is that there's a progression. Somewhere along the line, you began to clutch your money as if it were the most important thing in your life. Now, we've already talked about the fact that in the first part of verse number 9, the temptation and the snare actually the verse is talking about one thing, and that's drowning. So let me quickly give you the gist of this, and we'll move on. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare. Now the temptation is, as we saw, it's the word for the temptation of Christ when he saw the world, the riches, and the glory of the world. To sell his soul to Satan to get the world for that price. That's why he said, "What shall it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" That's the temptation. Yes, outwardly you're grasping your money, but inwardly you're losing your soul. Yes, outwardly you have it all, your so-called security, but inwardly your soul becomes leaner and leaner. But there's a temptation to do that because we can see our money. We can see what's in the bank. But isn't the life of faith is walking by faith and not by sight necessarily? Yes, it's important to have that, but if it goes tomorrow, what are you going to rely on? If the grace of God is not your source of security in poverty or prosperity, then you're missing the point. The love of money progressively destroys men. That's the word snare. It's a catch-22. I either keep my money and lose my life, or I let go of the money and keep my life. A shipwreck is seen here. Now, he falls into many foolish and hurtful lusts. First, it's the word unwise, foolish, hurtful, bringing harm to himself. Actually, it's a neat little concept here, just quickly. At the end of verse number 10, they that covet after money, as make money their God, have pierced themselves through with many sorrows. In other words, I found a verse here as to why preaching on money hurts everybody. Usually it means that we're hurting ourselves. That's what the verse means. Piercing ourselves through with many, many sorrows. Okay, let's go back. They drown men. Everything is in the hold of the ship. You want to take something with you, but in a deep ocean, you can't swim with about 20 or 30 pounds of silver on your back. It's just an impossibility, especially in a storm. So you've got a situation here. And that situation is this. It drowns men in destruction and perdition. First of all, you have one half of the journey down. And that is the word destruction. The word destruction there means to enter a worsening state or condition. Now, what is the worsening state? Everybody understands, if you've ever been in the water before and tried to dive, that there is a point at which you have to have enough air in you to go so far, and then if you want to breathe, if you want to live anymore, you've got to have enough air to get you back to the surface again. So the destruction indicated is a worsening condition. The deeper you go, the less oxygen you have, and the less likely it is for you to be able to get to the surface to spare your life. That's why if the love of money is your particular sin, you better let it go, because you are approaching swiftly a point of destruction or a point of no return. You've got the 30 pounds of silver, but it's drowning you. You're heading down. Now that's the first half. Once you get past the point of no return, the word perdition is involved. Now, perdition is a word that is used of hell. What do people do in hell with regard to all of their possessions? Let them go. How much did they leave? All of it. You are still alive here, holding on past the point of no return. But there comes a point of perdition. There comes a point of separation. What do I mean by that? You are either too weak to hold on to it and let it go, or you hold on to it all the way till you die and let it go. Either or, the word perdition there means ruin or disaster. It means that money will take you to the point of no return if you keep grasping it as you're drowning. But that the irony of it all, the great switcheroo with regard to money, is you can't hold on to it to begin with. There comes a point of separation. And as strong as you are, as much capacity as you have, if you keep holding on to it, eventually you're going to let go of it in total ruin and disaster. Only what you do with regard to a proper view of money will last not only in time but in eternity.